Okay guys, I'm gonna make this a relatively quick video, but I just want to remind everybody just how bad Leftist Writers are. Now there's a big story going on right now about The Last of Us, and the controversial decision on how to take the second game. And now that normies who never play video games have now learned what the actual plot of the second game is, people are revolting. And of course, leftists have come out in droves to mock them, while ratings for the show have gone down drastically. So you guys aren't aware, I wasn't that much of a fan of the ending to The Last of Us. I never bought the game, I never played it, but I was watching a Let's Play, and I believe it was from Markiplier, and I think it was just Markiplier when I was still a fan of his. Now, at the time, this was before Markiplier started to get a little bit political. So I was still a huge fan of him. And I really didn't like how the story ended up. Basically, at the end of the story, spoilers, but a lot of people who watch the show, the first season's already over, so they know what happens. At the end of the video game, the Fireflies take Ellie and are about to, vivisect her because she is somehow immune from the mushroom plague. And they want to figure out why. And since the mushrooms grow on the brain, they basically have to pop her skull off and check and see, what the hell is going on. And they do it without her permission. They find her unconscious, they sedate her immediately, and then they bring her straight into the operating room. Just right off the bat. No talking about it, no negotiation, no, doing any sort of, basic tests or anything, no blood work. Nothing that, nothing intelligent, let's just say. They just want to go straight for it. And in the end, her, surrogate mother figure, which, it's not really her mother figure, kinda. It's basically, her mother's best friend just decides to go through with this. And Joel, her surrogate father, doesn't allow it to happen. Again, there's no negotiation. They don't even, deal with Joel because they know this dude is, the most insane, strongest, fighter, a huge survivalist, just absolutely done horrible things in his life, is the guy they pay to do the hardest jobs possible, and they just don't even bother to give him, a heavy guard, and the guard who's defending him gets, knocked out immediately, his gun taken, and then Joel just runs all the way through. The Fireflies, apparently, after decades of doing this crap, don't have any military tactics whatsoever. The whole thing is just absolutely ridiculous on how the whole thing goes down. And again, there's no plan whatsoever. And then at the end of the game, it appears that Joel lies to Ellie. And it's kind of hard to tell because we only have his word on it. But he apparently talks to the leader of the Fireflies at the end of the game, and she admits, according to Joel, because we never see this scene, she admits that there were a lot of people, just like Ellie, who had immunity, and they were never able to make a cure out of it. And Ellie clearly doesn't believe this, because, duh, it doesn't make any sense. And then they basically have, a breakup of their relationship, and she goes on her own way. And then in the DLC, they show that even as a young girl, she was only ever interested in women and never interested in men. And it's just okay. I point out that latter part because it kinda set the precedence for what would come later. Now, it was hinted in the first game that there was a gay couple, a hardcore survivalist, very isolationist, off on his own, basically, set up booby traps everywhere, and then he has a dude that lives with him, and it's like heavily implied, maybe even stated in journals, that they were actual lovers, but at the end, the guy gets so frustrated with this lunatic that he leaves on his own to find like an actual civilization and not be trapped with this like crazy dude that sets like bombs and mines and tripwires all over the place. Like, he wants to live a normal life, and then the survivalist is just like overprotective. He's like, you know, just an absolute lunatic, right? Well, then in the second game, Joel, the fan favorite character, is immediately like eliminated from the show. I mean, eliminated from the video game by the daughter of the doctor at the end of the first game. Now, the doctor in the first game was the one who was supposed to perform the surgery. And all he does is he threatens you with a scalpel. And it doesn't matter what you do to him. Like, whether you use lethal force or non-lethal force, he just falls over like a sack of potatoes and he's gone. Like, you don't... like, you can't spare the guy no matter what. Even if you just, like, throw a potato at his head, he just, like, falls over and that's it. Like, just absolute stupidity. And they, like, scream at you that you're a monster! Even if you, like, literally, like, poke the guy. And he doesn't even do anything to you. If you, like, walk up to him and try to talk to Ellie, like, he doesn't take a swipe at you or anything. They just want you, they just railroad you into, like, taking this guy out, despite the fact that he's, like, completely and utterly harmless. And in the second game, his daughter shows up, finds Joel by accident, and then basically just clubs him with a 9-iron. And then you play as Ellie for the rest of the game. There was a few strange things about the game, and I want to talk, it's a different company than the one who made, like, Assassin's Creed Shadows, but in Assassin's Creed Shadows, there's this huge controversy that you are allowed to desecrate Japanese temples. Well, in The Last of Us, the second game, like, at one point, they have to make a huge deal of the fact that Ellie's girlfriend is Jewish, and they bring you through a synagogue and talk about World War II. And, like, you can't interact in the synagogue whatsoever. You can't, like, do anything. You can't mess anything up. They just basically drag you through. And then, at one point, like, some dude that represents, like, the right, I guess, calls Ellie, like, the D word with the DY as a, like, or something. And basically, they cancel him. And even after he, like, asks for forgiveness, cooks them cupcakes, like, does everything in his power to make it up to her, like, they just don't accept the apology. They just treat him like he's, like, persona non grata. Despite the fact that he's been humiliated, beaten up, like, absolutely, like, his life destroyed for saying a word. And even after all that, they don't forgive him for, like, his horrible offense of using a slur. It kind of set the precedence of, like, what the second game was going to be about, and people were really upset. The writing was stupid. And I saw the shadows of this in the first game with how that ending went down. And then people just absolutely hated the second game. Well, in the TV show, they decided to take that crazy guy, that crazy gay guy, and make him into the most loving, caring, like, dude in the world. His boyfriend loves him. It's super obvious that they're gay. It's not even a hint to that. It's just, like, outright stated. And they love each other. They die in each other's arms. Like, this crazy dude who sets booby traps everywhere and doesn't allow his boyfriend to ever leave and talk to anybody else. is just treated as the nicest dude in the world. So it's like, you can see the progression on how freaking woke the writing team is for the game and the show. They might be different people, but it's still the same creator, right? Like, they really softened up this character and made this, like, huge deal about it. And it didn't even add to the story at all. I don't think, like, Joel even, like, has any major moments with the dude. They just took his role out of the video. Like, in the video game, he helps you get a car. And in the show, I don't think he even does, like, that much. Now, again, after what happened in the second game, and at the end of the first game, I was never going to give money to these people because I just saw, like, how horrible they were going to be with all this. So I just like, okay, you know what, screw this, I don't care. But it's been interesting hearing about all the progression and just how bad it got. Well, anyways, now, they decided to keep the stupidest decision in the world in the second season, which is to have Joel taken out by this woman with a 9-iron. This guy who's like taking out hundreds of people on his own. Just like, and they even take out his brother too. Despite the fact that this completely destroyed like fans' enjoyment of the series. Like, they couldn't have him paralyzed, they couldn't have him like in a coma for a few years or anything like that. No, they had to go and make the exact same mistake and then compound it by like changing stuff to make it even more woke. And now they're calling everybody phobic or whatever, saying like that they just don't get it, like these are all racist anyway, so who cares? And the show's ratings have tanked horrifically. It just goes to show just like how bad the leftists are when it comes to this stuff. I already talked about it, but I also like want to point out again Invincible. They have done so much bad with the original content. Like, for instance, like the female queen of Atlantis in the original actually was really attracted to Mark and was actually looking forward to marrying him. And like their whole thing was, you do the trial by combat. Whoever wins the trial by combat then has to make love to the queen in front of the entire kingdom. And obviously Mark doesn't want to do that, so he finds out the bodyguard loves the queen, so he helps the bodyguard to pass the trial. And in the show, she's a strong, independent woman who don't need no man, and she's highly resentful of her husband because her husband wanted to save people on the surface. They also race swapped Amber because apparently it's impossible for a black woman to play a white woman. Like, they have to change the race of people. It's basically a requirement. And they had to make her into a strong, independent woman who figured out Mark's secret before he's supposed to tell her. And then completely, they have to make her into like this horrible person who is just so hurt by the fact that her boyfriend can't trust her with his secret and put her life in danger with the knowledge of that secret. And, you know, he's new at this, he doesn't really get how it all works, and he's afraid that if they ever break up, maybe she'll, like, tell the press or whatever, you know, stuff like that. Stuff like any teenager would be worried about. And it completely destroyed people's, like, confidence in the show writers, and like, people hated Amber, hated her so much, in fact, that they actually had to take out the scene where her new boyfriend, like, physically abuses her. Probably because they were afraid that fans would actually celebrate it and call it karma. And the whole thing about that is it's supposed to show, like, Mark then goes and threatens the dude's life despite the fact that he's not with her anymore, to show that, one, he still cares about her, and two, like, how dark a path he's going down. And they just completely drop it from the show. They also drop, like, several elements where he is, like, indirectly responsible for the death of villains, because they want him to be a little bit more whiny and complain a little bit more about how he doesn't take people's lives, despite the fact that they have endangered literally millions of people. And I'm not defending, like, the actual character himself, but just how badly they write Adam Wilkins. And this was true in the original series, too, in the original comic book. Now, again, not defending Adam's behavior, but in the original comic book, he is supposed to come off as this misogynist who doesn't want his daughter to have, like, a life of her own. But they also want to make it so that he has, like, kind of a point that, you know, what she's doing is incredibly dangerous and it's not something that she should be engaging in with all this superhero work, because it's very likely she's going to get herself killed by doing it. But they have to make him as big as a straw man as possible. Even when, like, he makes a point that, like, people might agree with, like, hey, you're going to get yourself killed, you need to stop this, you've been doing this since you were a little kid, I don't want you to be a child soldier for the government, more or less. Because she's basically manipulated, in many cases, to work with, like, superhero teams. And now she's, like, independent enough to refuse them, kind of like Mark is. But, like, she always ends up being pulled back into the game one way or another, even when she wants to take time off. And she almost gets killed on several occasions, proving Adam's point. But again, they want to make this whole thing song and dance about how he's just such a misogynist. Like, he's just so bigoted against superheroes. He just hates them so much. And it doesn't come off as, like, remotely realistic. It's just like, they really want to make this dude into a straw man, while giving him, like, valid points here or there. Because they gotta show that you're like, yeah, this is, like, so dangerous, but, like, she can totally continue to do this as long as she does it in the right way. I'm not saying that, like, Eve is not, like, a great superhero. She's one of the strongest on Earth, and that she really should be involved in these situations, but she's not, like, too creative with her powers. In fact, in the prequel, where she finds out, like, where she came from and how she was created and how she got her powers, she's actually better at using her powers in the prequel than she is in the modern, like, time period. Which is just so bizarre to me. In fact, like, in the original, like, series, like, in the actual show, not in the special, she says that she would get so nervous that she would throw up after, like, engaging in superhero work. And they don't show any of that. Like, any of that in the prequel. Like, they don't show her concern. They show her, like, actually super into it, super confident, never, like, second-guessing herself. In fact, when like, her surrogate father tells her that you gotta stop doing this, she just keeps making excuses, like, is a strong little Miss Badass, and is not at all, like, concerned about anything. It's like that whole, like, show, don't tell aspect of storytelling that they utterly fail at, and it's just so cringe. And it really takes away from the show, to the point where, especially since it's, like, made by Amazon, I just really don't want to give them money, despite the fact of how interesting the actual concepts are. It's insane. And then you have, like, The Boys, where they take Homelander and decide to make him into Trump. Except they don't understand anything that Trump believes or what he, like, actually wants to do. They just, like, make him into, like, a cult leader. Which, again, I have pointed this out many times, but one of the things about Trump is that he specifically hires people who are not yes men, who will, like, argue against him, who would tell him that he needs to, like, engage in a different course of action. And he hires them specifically for their opinions. And he asks people for their opinions, and then he makes his decision based on that. What he wants from people, though, is he wants people to be respectful, and that when he makes his final decision, that they don't try to undermine him or continue to argue a point they have already lost. He wants people to get in line and then follow through with his plan. But he bases that plan on the people he actually trusts. He gets these plans from other people, and then he has his own strong personal opinions. So he wants people who are loyal, but at the same time, not total suck-ups. But they try to ruin the entire Boys series by, like, adding in this Trumpian element to Homelander. Like, they just don't understand the right whatsoever in that show. And Homelander is not a political figure. Like, he wasn't in the original comic book. He was just a dude who abused his power. In fact, his politics is, like, never even talked about in the original. And they just really want to throw in this political message for no reason whatsoever. And it just takes out from the whole show. Just, like, undermines, like, everything. And, again, it's just so pointless. Because they have to take their swipe at Trump. They have to make it about the modern day. They can't just have the story as it was. Now, spoilers for the comic book. This is clearly not where the show is going in the actual show, but in the comic book, it turns out that Black Noir is actually a clone of Homelander. Again, this is not in the show, and even the new Black Noir is clearly not a clone of Homelander. But in the comic book, the clone of Homelander is specifically genetically programmed to take out Homelander in case he ever goes rogue. And he's actually stronger than Homelander. Now, since Homelander never goes rogue, Black Noir is left without a purpose. So he basically goes insane, and then he starts to frame Homelander for all these horrible crimes. And Homelander, seeing his face all over the news or in, like, secret video recordings, doing, like, this terrible, terrible things, starts to think that he has, like, a split personality disorder. And then he goes insane, and then he goes rogue, and that gives Black Noir the excuse to follow through with his genetic programming to take out Homelander. And it turns out Homelander is just an idiot. He just didn't realize that, like, the company had created a clone of him. He didn't understand psychology enough to realize that he literally couldn't have done anything that, like, he had been accused of. But in the show, they want to make him into, like, this Trumpian figure who is actually as evil as the comic book tried to, like, portray him as, until, like, the ending twist where it turns out he wasn't evil, he was just an idiot. And then he only became evil because he went insane. And again, it just takes out, like, the whole experience. Especially since that twist, while completely out of the blue, was, like, foreshadowed. And it was actually kind of interesting to figure, like, at the end of the show, he could have been a hero. He could have been, like, the best hero in the world. But he was just so obsessed with his power, and he was just so naive as to think that, oh, I just got a split personality. It's like, oh, that's weird. I guess I will be evil now. Like, he could have been the best hero in the world, but it's like, nope. Just easily manipulated into doing something that he would regret. And he ends up dying, and then Black Noir gets his comeuppance, because he's the one who did all the horrible things. Billy Butcher takes him out with a crowbar, because he's so damaged from the fight that he was unable to survive even a simple thing. And then you had Spiderman. And I'll make this one really quick. J. Jonah Jameson. They wanted to make him into an Alex Jones ripoff, completely ignoring that Alex actually based a lot of his news stories on actual facts and statistics, and, like, the whole thing about the frogs being gay. I talked about this before too, where like birth control in the water actually does like affect frogs because their eggs are like transparent, easily absorbed fluid, and the chemicals get in there and screw up the life cycle of the frog and endanger the frog's like existence. But they want to ignore that Alex Jones ever has a point, and they want to make J. Jonah Jameson into this complete like lunatic with no point to be made whatsoever. Like J. Jonah Jameson like supports mutants. He supports superheroes. He loves like patriotic people. But he doesn't like vigilantes, which is his whole thing with Spider-Man. Despite Spider-Man being a hero and being a red-blooded American, he doesn't like the fact that Spider-Man does not work through the law. And you know, if Spider-Man just joined the Avengers straight out the gate, it would make sense in that he would get, like, permission to do all this, and then everything will be fine. But Spider-Man also creates his own villains, too. They took that from the first game, which was a clear indicator of where the writing team was going, and then the writing team got it in their heads that it would just be great gameplay footage for you to suddenly start playing as Miles' death girlfriend, spray painting a wall. I'm not sure if it's graffiti or she's hired to do it, but it's like just gripping gameplay of like spending several minutes as a deaf girl spray painting a wall, and they made it super woke, and people absolutely hated it. Again, the left is just, they gotta throw in their politics everywhere, they gotta throw in their diversity quotas, they gotta always like make fun of the right, even though they don't understand any of the beliefs of the right. They like always gotta make these jabs, and it's just so cringe. It ruins all these series. Like, it, as good as Invincible is, like, the best of these, like, Spider-Man 2 is a complete flop. Or, at least, like, they're not going to make a third game, because that would be a complete flop. The second game just turned everyone off from the series. So even if the second game made money, they're unlikely to make a third one just because of how bad it is. And then, the same with The Last of Us. And they're doubling down on the bad writing decisions and actually making them worse. And then The Boys, like, is trying to drive out half of their viewing audience by adding in this political twist that was not in the original comic whatsoever. The best one of these is clearly Invincible, because the fights are just so good, and some of the stuff, like, involving Donald, for example, is just so well written. But then they add in, like, all this woke stuff to the point where I'm just like, I kind of don't want to give them money, because by season 8 or season 9, however far they get, they're probably going to add in stuff that's so off-the-wall crazy that it's just going to ruin the entire series. Like, they're going to change something really vital, and that just ruins the whole thing. Because just look at how much they changed The Walking Dead, and how they took out one of the main survivors of the comic book, like the little girl. I forget her name off the top of my head. But it's kind of like, they kind of flipped the whole thing on its head, and it kind of turned people off once they got rid of, like, Rick. Now, you could have kept Rick alive, but the whole point of the comic book was that, like, eventually only the girl, Sophia, I think, and Carl survive, and it's the new generation moving on. Whereas Carl dies in the show, and Monique, is that her name? I gave up, like, a long time ago with The Walking Dead. Like, the black woman. Now, you could have her survive as well as Rick, if you want to change things, but it completely subverts, like, the whole message of, like, the original, whereas the new generation will be better than the last generation. Again, it's just stuff that I'm just like, it's what turns people off to the whole thing. The left just does not know how to keep a good story going. They always ruin it somehow, some way. And it's just so frustrating. Just look at the Marvels, for example. It's just bad what's happened to the Marvel universe. And it's just so disappointing. And it's why I never give these people money, because I know that eventually they're going to ruin it. It's just a matter of when and how they're going to do it. But anyways, I got to get to work, guys, so that's it for now. Don't trust writers. Just don't. They're from Hollywood. You know how Hollywood is. It's really bad over there. Bye for now.